Good afternoon, teachers. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon, Teacher Jambi at Teacher Pao.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Nice to be
Yan,
back.
Nice. Yes, parang kailan lang kakatapos sila ng October series natin. Magandang hapon po sa inyo, teachers. And thank you for joining us here in this afternoon sa session to begin our November series. At Sir Jambi at saka Teacher Pao, medyo kinakabahan ako dito sa session natin ngayon kasi it's either baka ma-retain ako sa trabaho or baka mawalan ako ng trabaho after this session. No? So, medyo alanganin at titignan natin kung saan papunta ang aking tadhana after this session. Pero this is a dream come true at may share ko kung bakit dream come true itong session na to para sa akin, para sa Kaagapay Teacher Support for this afternoon. But before we do that, Sir Jambi and Teacher Pao, let's greet our teacher first. Good afternoon. Let's do a shout out first, okay? Starting from sa napakaaga, sisimula ko na kagad ang ating pre-service teacher, na bagong taga-subaybay ng Kaga. Yes, okay? 2:19 p.m. Okay, Sir Jambi. Okay? Teacher Carrie. Yes. Teacher Carrie Dominic Abihoro. Teacher Raquel Manawis. Good afternoon. Teacher Rosemalen Rosella. Sabi nga, Teacher Rosemalen, bibili na ako ng pagkain. Order na ako ng food para sure. Okay? Teacher Flodeline Ramirez. Good afternoon. Teacher Maria Rosalina Aquino. Good afternoon. Teacher Christina Munar. Yan, may kasalanan pa ako kay Teacher Christina, Kasi isa siya sa mga winner natin nung time out tita kit. Kaya lang nagbumalik yung package na. So Teacher Christina, we're sorry, we apologize for that. We'll resend your package as soon as possible. Okay? And Teacher Alex Xavier Alvarez, good afternoon. Teacher Syra Ramos, Teacher Angeline Caha, and Teacher Maria Ana P. Sumalinog, which is always with us every single time in all our sessions. Okay? Sir Jambi?
Okay, binabati din natin, Sir Franco, si Teacher Andy Padernilla, Teacher Milay Dalingay, watching from Baguio City. Favorite natin, Sir Franco. Binabati din si Teacher Florenda Felicio, watching from Naval, Biliran. Good afternoon po. Teacher Dolly Ann Reyes, good afternoon din po. We also would like to greet Teacher Mel Hassan Indanan. Ayan, not sure where our viewer is from, but I'm thinking definitely from abroad. Teacher Rodelisa Tiotanco, good afternoon din po, watching from SDO Malabon, Tinajeros National High School. Ayun, ang bilis sumagot, Palawan pala.
Nasagot ka pala.
Datenso kay teacher. Palawan pala. Ayan. Hello sa Palawan. Teacher Mary Ann Onin, good afternoon to you as well. Teacher John Paul Laurio, good afternoon din po. Sige, dito na. I'll end with Teacher Edna Despi. Good afternoon din po. Teacher Pao.
All right. So, we're greeting also from Marawi, umakyat. Sandali. Ba't ang bilis nun? Nawala. Why are you like that? Okay, there. I'm from Marawi. Teacher Jinehan Khalil. Ayan. Tapos si Sir Franco, binabati kita, Sir Franco, Good luck sa'yo pagkatapos itong webinar na to. Of course, we're greeting Teacher Leticia Laison, Teacher Angelina Carpi Reyes, Teacher Tanit Kongsharoen Suk from Thailand. From Quezon, Teacher Violeta Racho. Good afternoon to Sir Joe Bustamante, Ma'am Gregory Lambenicio, Sir Marvin Barcelon from Mindanao State University. Of course, Sir Jeffrey Beltran, as always, nandito siya. Yan, sobrang bilis ba? November series na nga. And then Teacher Romel Rosita, Teacher Lamberto Pilatan, Teacher Alex Xavier Alvarez, from Gidapaon, Teacher Manolita White, always here, Teacher Leslie Labitad, Teacher Christy Mohammed, Teacher Crizel De Villa from Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Bansud Branch. Saan kaya yun, Then we have pre-service teacher, Teacher Carrie Dominic Abejuro, Teacher Girly Vergara, and Teacher Giovanni Alpuero from Matalam, Cotabato Province. Ang layo talaga ng nararating natin ngayong pandemya, Kung saan-saan. Ayan. I'll stop there, Teacher Franco.
Yes, we
Yes,
are.
because
No, we are definitely all over the Philippines right now. And also
yes,
some viewers from outside of the country. No, I saw kanina si Teacher Hetish Kumar from
yeah,
outside
always.
of the Philippines as well. Always here with us, no, Teacher Hetish. No, and thank you for always supporting us. So teachers, for the rest of our teachers in the chat box, in the room right now, in the live stream right now, okay, all 113 of us. Okay, thank you and maraming salamat for your presence here. Okay, and ano 'no, huwag kayo bibitaw kasi, siyempre 'no, ang simula ng ating November series ay napakabigat 'no, at napakaganda. Okay, so Teacher Pao, Teacher, Sir Jambi, okay, to start off 'no, our November series, we'll be taking on project-based learning, okay, redefining instruction and assessments in the 21st century. And I can definitely attest to this 'no, in so many ways kasi we are a school no that actually implemented and are actually implementing project-based no learning in our curriculum. Okay? At nung pinakilala sa amin to, medyo talagang ano no, bumaliktad yung aming pagkakaunawa about assessments, okay? About curriculum, and that's what we hopefully can do today no, for us to revisit curriculum, assessments, and ano no, and to as the title says no, to redefine instruction and assessments in the 21st century. Teacher Pao, any comments on this one? Uh, PBL, okay? What's up with PBL? Okay? Anong
Actually,
meron?
I've always heard this, no, pero I've never really entertained, doing project-based learning kasi I'm exposed to a different curriculum. So it's I don't know, no? Baka naman mare-relate ni Madam, no? Kung ano yung program na hawak ko, baka naman, no? But this is something that I think a lot of our teachers are actually working on. Marami na akong naririnig about this, and I'd like to hear, no, what really is in store pag sinabing project-based learning. No, kasi syempre ang alala ko dito performance task, no, rather than the usual pen and the paper test. You have that, but aside from that, I really have to dig deep, and I'm
Dig
sure
deep.
our speaker will be able to do something about my knowledge in
Yes. Okay.
PGL.
Confident,
Yes.
confident. Sir Jambi?
Ingat na ingat eh, no? Ah, ano ba? Hindi. Um, ako naman, I'd like to believe na lahat ng guro, um, more or less tama naman yung intention at saka yung we always have the best interest of our students in mind. And minsan hindi lang natin napangalanan pero marami ng guro yung gumagawa ng project-based instruction kahit hindi pa siya na-introduce at napapangalanan nga ng project-based. So yung sinasabi kanina ni Sir Franco na na bumaliktad yung mundo niya, feeling ko bumalik pero pumunta sa tamang posisyon. Ayan. Kasi narinig ko naman si Sir Franco pag nagtuturo siya ng project base. Grabe yung excitement, grabe yung passion, 'di ba? Kung 'yun ang ibig sabihin ng bumaliktad ang mundo ng mga teacher, di baliktarin natin yung mundo nilang lahat. 'Di ba? So excited for
Totoo.
this.
Yes, maraming salamat no, Teacher Sir Jambi. Totoo no, kasi uh, project-based learning really ano no, introduced to us new some concepts that are walang pangalan pero ginagawa na natin. And of course no, isa sa pinakamaganda siguro aspect ng project-based learning is that madami sa aspect no and principles sa project-based learning ay naka-anchor talaga sa 21st century education, and that's what we hope to actually to do now no, to relate no and to put our direction for education towards 21st century. Okay? So teachers, we're excited. I know you're excited. We are all excited. Ako medyo kabado ng konti din pero I'm equally excited because our speaker for today is someone very close to me and also an inspiration kaya for the last few years, especially during the pandemic years in our school. Okay, so Sir Jambi, let's introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you, Sir Franco. As always, it is my pleasure to introduce to you, mga kaagapay namin, our very special guest speaker for this afternoon. She is a dynamic educator who has 24 years of experience in the field of education. Her first teaching job was as a Jesuit volunteer assigned to teach English in the far-flung area of Pangantukan, Bukidnon, where she discovered her love for teaching. After this 1 year stint, she decided to pursue this profession and worked in Xavier School, Manila, where she served in the following roles: high school English teacher, English department chairperson, assistant for academic affairs, and assistant principal for academics. At present, she serves as the high school principal as well as the academic supervisor of the Xavier School system. She finished with a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of the Philippines in Diliman and a master's degree in education, major in educational administration from the Ateneo de Manila University. As a learning leader, she advocates for student-centered learning and teacher empowerment. Her areas of interest include reading and writing instruction, assessment practices and policies, instructional strategies, and of course, project-based learning. Ladies and gentlemen, mga kaagapay, please join me in welcoming with the warmest round of applause, Miss Maria Teresa N. Ladrido.
Good
Good afternoon.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Franco, Pao, and Jambi. And of course, good afternoon to all the watchers, the audience of Kaagapay. This afternoon, maayong adlaw, maayong hapon sa inyong tanan. Okay?
Good afternoon, Miss Tess. And again, no, kung hindi niyo pa po na-realize na si Miss Tess po ay aming principal no, sa school kung saan po ako nagtuturo. Kaya po talagang medyo grabe yung pressure po. Good afternoon, Miss Tess, and welcome to Kaagapay Teacher Support Community. Okay? And we're very excited no, for your session for today. But before we give you the floor and we start your presentation and the discussion of project-based learning, maybe you could give us like an overview of what's going to transpire and what's going to be covered for today. And maybe some disclaimers, okay, if there are things that we will not be able to cover or touch on for today.
Okay, thank you very much, Franco. So for this afternoon, of course, I'm going to be talking about project-based learning. I'm sure some of you have already heard of it. Some of you have experienced it. Well, some of you may have, maybe this will be your first time to hear about it. So what I'll be sharing with you this afternoon is just really the basics of PBL. Of course, we can go on for days about talking about PBL, but siguro for today, patikim lang muna, no? Patikim lang muna because it can get very technical. So what I want to be able to do this afternoon is to give an overview of what PBL, project-based learning, is all about. Maybe give you the need-to-knows, some tips on how you can actually go about it. And also, I will share with you the experiences, our PBL experiences in Xavier School. And therefore, because I will be sharing with you first-hand experiences of PBL in Xavier School, please know that, of course, our context is different from the context of your schools or your respective schools. And therefore, what we believe in as Jesuit educators, no, tantum quantum, and then also please know na lang that use whatever or get whatever it is that you can apply. Okay, but if ever you think that it will not be applicable to your school, feel free to throw it away. But if there's anything that you think you can beg, steal, or borrow, please feel free to do so. There.
Thank you, Ms. Tess, and we're excited for your presentation, Ms. Tess. Okay, so teachers, okay, don't forget that this session will be certified. Okay, so you'll be getting a certificate no, after doing the evaluation. So, Ms. Tess, good luck po. And to our teachers, enjoy the session. Okay, we'll be at the chat to engage you. So please do let us know of your questions or concerns in the chat.
Thank you very much. Okay. I need to share my screen. I
I'm not
think.
share na po yung screen. We'll just wait for the presentation mode po.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Am I good to
You're
go,
in, ma'am.
Franco?
Yes,
Okay.
you're good to go, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So once again, good afternoon to all of you, and I'll be sharing about project-based learning 101, so the basics of project-based learning, and of course, our goal is towards authentic and transformative learning. What I'd like to request is, of course, for everyone to keep your minds active as I talk about project-based learning. So if you have questions, clarifications, or even suggestions, feel free to write them on the chat box, and then maybe later we can go back to them, and we can respond to your queries. Okay. So, what do we want to be able to achieve for this afternoon? Of course, I would like all of us to be able to reflect on our personal learning and teaching experiences, as well as our roles as 21st century educators. What I will be presenting here are, of course, many principles about assessment and instruction. And of course, our hope is for you to be able to make connections with whatever it is that I'll be sharing. About project based learning and about assessment and instruction. Of course, because this is about PBL, I hope that by the end of this session, all of you would have been more familiar, would have become more familiar about as regards the principles and features and need to knows of PBLs, and hopefully be able to use them in your respective classrooms. And of course, okay, important is hopefully at the end of the session, everyone, all of us would have gained insights and ideas on how we can make our classes, okay, not just applicable, not just to be able to implement PBL, no, but more than anything to make our classes, our classrooms, places of authentic learning or for authentic and meaningful learning. And of course, at the end of the day, we all want students who are prepared for the real world. Okay. Now, I'd like to begin by asking you to envision your ideal class. Okay. So if you'd like to close your eyes, okay, or to look far while you're doing this, I want you to envision your ideal class. How does your dream or ideal class look like? How does it sound like? And how does it feel like? Okay. Concretely, when you try to imagine or envision your ideal class, what are the students doing in your classes? Okay. What are the students saying? Okay. What are the teachers doing and saying? And what do the students and teachers feel and think? Okay. So I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. And please feel free to write your responses, your answers on the chat box. Franco, if you're there, can you read, or if there are certain responses, please feel free to share them if there are.
So far, wala pa pong response. I think they're still constructing kasi medyo baka mahaba yung ano nila. Teachers, please feel free to just answer maybe one or two of the questions or all of them no in phrases lang po. Hindi kailangan ng essay. Baka po essay mistes.
Oh,
Yes.
hindi kailangan essay, kahit two
Yan.
words lang, kahit 3 words lang, phrases will be okay. Can be in Tagalog, can be in Ilocano, I can understand Ilocano, Visayan, okay din.
Ito may answer na from teacher Carrie Dominic Abihoro. Engage and participative.
Okay, thank you very much. Engage and participative. Thank you. Okay.
From teacher
Also,
Rose Helen Rosell,
yes.
play-based, and nature-based class.
Okay, wow, ang ganda naman yan, play-based and nature-based, okay?
Yan ma'am, ang dami na pong sagot ngayon ma'am. Flowing na yung sagot ngayon. Teacher Mel Hassan in Danan, they are doing their given task and working with their classmates.
Okay.
From teacher Eloisa Laksamana, engaging all are raising their hands. From teacher Christian Paul Atrazo, a classroom full of students debating about the relevant issues of our society. From teacher Sonia Yap, my class has positive vibe. Yun ma'am, medyo madami na po ma'am ang responses ng mga teachers natin.
Yeah, I think those will be okay. And then we'll go back to them later and we can read it after, no? But thank you very much for sharing your ideal class. And I think I share your sentiments. I share your vision, no? And most of you, with what you shared, we can actually sum it to something like most of you who responded, or at least the ones I heard, would like your students to be engaged, okay, to be active, to be busy, to be the ones doing the tasks. Okay, so very engaged, very active, very participative. Now, that's your ideal class, and therefore, I'd like to ask you now, um, how far is your ideal class from your reality? Okay, I want you to zoom in, okay, to look at this comic strip where the student says, is this the test to test us for the test to see if we are ready for the test? Okay. And the other one is the perfect way for me to demonstrate what I've learned in school is a standardized test, said no child ever. Okay. So to a certain extent, okay, how do these two comic strips, okay, perhaps reflect or mirror your reality? And how far do you think from your ideal class? Okay. Of course, I'm sure that there are days when our classes are really very active, okay? And there are some days that our classes are really very passive, okay? But if you're going to look at it holistically, would you say that your class, your students are really engaged most of the time? Are they usually participative? Okay. Do you think that they're very interested in what you're teaching them? Okay. Are they curious enough? And with the context of the comic strip, is this the test to test us for the test? Okay. Is your class filled with worksheets and exams? Okay. Maybe to your liking, or maybe because you are forced by the system, no? Um, or are your classes filled with a lot of activities where students you feel are very much really into it, are really interested, and are passionate about what they're doing? Okay, so you don't have to answer that, but I just want you to think about, okay, reflect about your own experiences as educators and what's happening inside your classes. Okay, I think that when we talk about our experiences as classroom teachers, many of us would still say that a lot of our classrooms are still filled with worksheets. Okay, I think this is also because of the fact that, of course, many of our classes, almost all, have huge class sizes, and therefore there are certain limitations and constraints that we need to work with. And we also have the different kinds of standardized exams that we have to comply with, okay, as required by the Department of Education. And sometimes, because of the many constraints and limitations, requirements that we need to comply with, okay, we're not really able to implement, okay, what we want, or we are not able to really have an ideal kind of class the way we want it to, okay, because there are certain things that we have to work around. So what we hope to be able to achieve, I think you also mentioned that a while ago when you describe what your ideal class was, is that you want more or less a class that's learner centered or student centered. So there will be less us teachers and more of them students doing the work. If I may just read what's written on the comic strip, no, I think it's an exaggeration, but there's a lot of truth in saying that when you go to school, the truth is you stop learning and you must now accept being taught. Okay, so that more or less, I think, is a sentiment of many educators. Okay, maybe not every day, but many times they ask themselves, what is what I'm teaching really relevant to the students? Or am I really equipping the students, my students, with the necessary tools that will prepare them for the real world? So think about it. Are your students, are your classes more of teacher driven or student driven? Do your students have choice in what they need to do or they want to do? Are they independent? Are they active? Or do you have to tell them all the time what they're supposed to do? Okay. And with that, I want to begin the PBL, okay, with really the basic principles or the big ideas that are anchored, or where it's anchored. So PBL is really a student-centered and student-driven kind of a framework in instruction and assessment. It is both an instructional and an assessment methodology, okay, so to speak. In a traditional setting, okay, the teacher and the learner serve the following roles. We're experts, the student is a learner, the sponge, or the performer. Okay, we really do everything so that the students will be engaged. Some close that minsan kailangan pa natin kumanta no, or kailangan pa natin sumayaw. And the students are the ones watching us, they're spectators. Or we inspect them when it comes to assessment. Okay, and they are the product. Okay, they have a certain grade. But what 21st century learning, okay, is all about is really for the teachers to relinquish their roles as the main source of knowledge into becoming more of a designer of the learning experiences, and the learner will be the investigator, the teacher is the facilitator, and the student is the meaning maker, and the teacher as a coach, okay, and the student is the one producing the content or the product, and he is the performer. So when you think of coach, when you think of maybe the role of a teacher, think of how they do it in PE classes, where the coach, okay, the PE teacher demonstrates, but the students are the ones who play, okay, and the students are the one who really perform the sports, okay. So that more or less encapsulates some of the roles of the teachers, or what the teachers should be doing as 21st century educators in their 21st century classrooms. When I think about it, of course, there's nothing wrong with, for example, pen and paper exams, no? But many of those things were really relevant during many decades ago, when really the world was less complex, okay, and there were probably less problems to solve. But now we live in a VUCA world. I'm sure you've heard of it. Okay, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world, and therefore we cannot just really limit our teaching and assessment strategies to just pen and paper, because we need the students to be authentic learners who will change the world. Now, with based on studies by Nancy Atwell and Grant Wiggins, students in the 21st century, okay, our students now really have this impression about school, okay? First, that it is boring and no fun, okay? Medyo ouch, no? Pero this is what some of the students say, that it has little relevance to the real world. It does not connect to the interests of the students. And there's one way of doing things most of the time. And there's always one audience, the teacher. So in other words, the student will perhaps write something or produce something. The teacher will check it, and it ends there. Okay. And then, of course, when it comes to the curriculum, it's really what is prescribed. Okay. Most of the time. And sometimes what's prescribed is not necessarily what the society needs. Okay. What we need today. Okay. Also, based on Wiggins' study, okay, on high school student survey, really when you talk about engagement, many students, specifically grades 9 to 12, are not very engaged in their classes for the reasons that they didn't find the material interesting, okay? They have very little interaction with the teacher, and the material was not relevant to them. And what they would like to be able to do more in their classes, I think someone mentioned it kanina, no, as part of this ideal class, they want more discussion and debate. Discussion, of course, by the students. Debate, more group projects, more projects involving technology, and student presentations. In other words, making learning more active and fun, more hands-on activities, and more opportunities for them to discuss their ideas with one another. Okay. Again, I'm sure many of us are doing this in our classes, but what we want for us to be able to transform our students to be really active learners is not just to do this paminsan. We want to do this more consistently, and we want to do this more purposefully. Okay. Now, PBL is really under the umbrella of inquiry-based learning, okay? Where students try to inquire based on a certain problem. So they ask questions, they probe into various situations. And usually in inquiry-based learning, teachers present a theme and concepts, and students are the ones who ask questions about it until they develop further understanding of that. Don't worry, okay, it seems very, what do you call this, vague to you. I will try to concretize that later. Okay. Now, in a principle, in inquiry-based learning, okay, learner or the student must be at the center of the process. Okay. In other words, the teacher must be able to pass on the task of doing more, okay, to the student rather than her, at least inside the classroom. Okay. Why am I saying that? Because I think the teacher's role primarily will be a lot of his task will be designing it on the side, but when it comes to the classroom, it will be the student who will be doing a lot more. Okay. Learning activities will revolve around information processing skills and research. Okay. Teachers facilitate the process, okay, but the students will be the ones to really be doing things. And there's really emphasis on evaluating not only, okay, the knowledge, but also the skills and even also the process. Now, many of you are wondering, what is project-based learning, or how different is it from performance task? How different is it from the regular project that we know? Okay. First, by definition, project-based learning is a teaching method. Remember, it is not just an assessment method. It is a teaching method where the students gain knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time. Okay. Extended period would mean maybe 2 weeks or longer. Okay. Um, Period of time, the student will investigate and respond to an authentic, engaging, and complex question. And in doing that, the student will be able to demonstrate their knowledge. And also, they will really present their product to an authentic or real audience. Okay. Let me
You remember what it was like in school. It was boring. You sat in class, memorized as much as you could, and tried to pass a test at the end. But is that good enough? These days, school can be more interesting and effective by focusing students on work that matters. This is project-based learning explained. Most adults live in a world of projects. Whether it's a job assignment, home improvement, or planning a wedding, we need to actively solve problems. But unfortunately, schoolwork looks more like this than this. Let's take a look at this project-based world. Meet Claire. She was recently presented with a challenge. Her company, Super Suds, makes soap, and it was up to her to find the most earth-friendly way to produce it in the future. Her boss gave her a budget and a few requirements, and it was up to her to come up with a solution. She organized and managed a team who researched the options and created materials summarizing the issues. Claire's team asked for feedback and presented their findings to the boss. Claire came out of the project looking like a rock star, and she learned a lot about green products. If you look closely, Claire's success involved critical thinking, collaboration, and communication, things that aren't often taught in traditional classrooms. The world needs more Claires, so how do we get them? The answer is project-based learning, or PBL. By focusing students on a project, teachers put them on a path that deepens their knowledge and builds skills they'll need in the future. Here's what I mean. Mr. Simmons has always been a good science teacher, and his students do well on Friday's tests. Unfortunately, what they learned was gone by Saturday morning. That wasn't good enough for him. Soon he learned about project-based learning and decided to give it a shot. Mr. Simmons got the idea for his first project on microorganisms when nearly half of his students were suddenly absent with the flu. He asked his students why they thought so many of their classmates got sick at the same time. That lively discussion produced a lot of good questions and a list of things the kids wanted to know. Mr. Simmons then announced their project was to help elementary school kids understand, how can we not get sick? After dividing the class into teams, he got them started on the project. It was up to the students to ask questions, research, collaborate, give each other feedback, and figure out the best ways to make their points clear to children. One team chose to make an educational video on the connection between hand washing and avoiding the flu. You remember what it was like in school. It was boring. You sat in class, memorized as much as you could, and tried to pass a test at the end. But is that good enough? These days, school can be...
I think it got cut. Was it, Franco?
Miss Tess, yes ma'am. Parang bumalik po siya sa start.
Okay, so sige, I will just show that. Let me share my screen so that I can show you again I will stop sharing this so I can share with you the video itself. Exit full screen. Okay.
And while we're waiting for Miss Tess, teachers, no,
Okay.
if you have questions, okay, you might want to already put that in chat. But so far, Miss Tess, no, what we have are insights, okay, from our teachers, okay, and sharing, no, about their experience in the classroom and different challenges that you have posted so far.
Yes, I can understand. It's really very challenging, especially now during the pandemic. It's really, really very challenging for many teachers. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Okay,
According
there you go.
ayan. According to
Okay.
Sir Rodolfo Alimanya, definitely this project-based learning is an authentic type of learning. I do use it with my TLE classes.
Yay. Thank you, thank you. So I'll share it again, Franco. Here.
Go ahead po, ma'am.
Can you see it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Boring. You sat in class, memorized as much as you could, and tried to pass a test at the end. But is that good enough? These days, school can be more interesting and effective by focusing students on work that matters. This is project-based learning explained. Most adults live in a world of projects. Whether it's a job assignment, home improvement, or planning a wedding, we need to actively solve problems. But unfortunately, schoolwork looks more like this than this. Let's take a look at this project-based world. Meet Claire. She was recently presented with a challenge. Her company, Super Suds, makes soap, and it was up to her to find the most earth-friendly way to produce it in the future. Her boss gave her a budget and a few requirements, and it was up to her to come up with a solution. She organized and managed a team who researched the options and created materials summarizing the issues. Claire's team asked for feedback and presented their findings to the boss. Claire came out of the project looking like a rock star, and she learned a lot about green products. If you look closely, Claire's success involved critical thinking, collaboration, and communication, things that aren't often taught in traditional classrooms. The world needs more Claires, so how do we get them? The answer is project-based learning, or PBL. By focusing students on a project, teachers put them on a path that deepens their knowledge and builds skills they'll need in the future. Here's what I mean. Mr. Simmons has always been a good science teacher, and his students do well on Friday's tests. Unfortunately, what they learned was gone by Saturday morning. That wasn't good enough for him. Soon he learned about project-based learning and decided to give it a shot. Mr. Simmons got the idea for his first project on microorganisms when nearly half of his students were suddenly absent with the flu. He asked his students why they thought so many of their classmates got sick at the same time. That lively discussion produced a lot of good questions and a list of things the kids wanted to know. Mr. Simmons then announced their project was to help elementary school kids understand, how can we not get sick? After dividing the class into teams, he got them started on the project. It was up to the students to ask questions, research, collaborate, give each other feedback, and figure out the best ways to make their points clear to children. One team chose to make an educational video on the connection between hand washing and avoiding the flu. Another chose to create posters to show how viruses spread. The project teams showed off their final work to an enthusiastic audience of parents and their children at a nearby elementary school. Sitting in the front row was our good friend and local rock star Claire, who saw a bit of herself in the students. It was clear that the project was a success for the students, the audience, and Mr. Simmons. His students practiced critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. The project wasn't about memorization, but learning in depth about viruses and how to prevent spreading disease, a lesson they will never forget. At the end of the presentation, Claire introduced herself to the students and told them that they were rock stars and that the world needs more people who can think like them. To learn more about project-based learning, go to BIE.org.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, if you have questions while I prepare to go back to my screen, please feel free to write them down. Any insights about what you've just watched? Please.
And so far, may mga ibang konting insight po dito from this is from teacher Lamberto Pilatan. I remember that last semester with my immersion subject class with my grade 12 students, I tasked them to make an individual portfolio. I think portfolio means is also very much like a go-to one of the outputs or assessments within the PBL framework. Okay? This one is from teacher Manolito White. Science is purely project-based learning. My activities include small grouping, group presentation, laboratory experimentation, educational field trips, competitive games, investigatory project, etc. Yung mga teachers po talaga natin, Miss Tess, are very, very active already.
Actually, you're right, Franco. I think a while ago, Sir Jambi mentioned that maybe in your schools, you don't call it project-based learning, but the features of project-based learning are actually already present, okay? So I think you're right with what the teachers have shared so far, investigatory projects, science, etc. Okay? So if I may now go back to my screen, I've just shared with you a video on project-based learning explained by the Bach Institute of Education. You can search more from their website. They're one of the proponents, really, of project-based learning. You will get a lot of resources from them, Bach Institute of Education. I think many of you are now asking, what makes then PBL different from maybe projects, performance, tasks? Okay, what are the differences among those three? You know, I also asked that question as we started to embark in PBL. Okay, so I will explain that to you. First, when we talk about projects, okay, and I'm talking about the projects as we knew it, is that when we give projects to students, or when I was a student, I was given a project, the audience was primarily the teacher. So I will make a project, okay, and the teacher will check it, and then it ends there. In fact, I remember this one project na grade 1 ako, pinagawa kami ng telepono. Hindi ko alam ba't kami pinagawa ng telepono. But of course, you know, I had to ask the help of my parents, and then syempre we really had a hard time doing that. Okay, syempre grade 1, my motor skills weren't good then yet. And then we just submitted it to the teacher, and that was it. I didn't really even understand what it was for exactly. So in projects, at least the traditional projects that we knew, okay, it's really very much structured by the teacher. Naka-decide na kung ano siya, what the product is, at siya rin yung mag-check. And then meron siyang set of criteria, for example, creativity, let's say the use of this art material, or maybe etc. etc. Okay, so very clear, very structured set of instructions. The student also remains as a student. So we give the project to a student who does not assume any kind of role, or who does not simulate any kind of situation. Okay, so it's really more of an assignment, a task, an exam, an alternative assessment, so to speak. That's the project. Make a diorama. Okay, so ang gagawin natin, let's say ang topic natin ay EDSA Revolution. At the end, I want you to do a diorama, okay, or a poster depicting the important highlights of EDSA Revolution. So that's a project, okay? It really comes after a lesson, okay? And it's really also mostly to assess, show demonstration of what we've learned, okay? Now, sa PBL, what makes it different is that the audiences are the real world. In other words, it just does not stop with the teacher. Okay, if your topic is, let's say, something with EDSA revolution or about the EDSA revolution, you may talk to actual proponents of the EDSA revolution then, okay? Or maybe you can present it to another school. It will depend on the design, but I will concretize that later, okay? But it goes outside the classroom, in other words, okay? Also, in PBL is organic and open-ended. In other words, the product may vary, okay? The process may vary depending on where the student is in terms of answering or probing or investigating the question that you will ask of them, okay? And then the student assumes a certain role. He is not just a student. For example, if it's EDSA revolution, he can take on the role of historians, trying to really find out what happened during EDSA revolution, okay? So they act as this people who really are engaged in the discipline, okay? And then it's published in the real world. In other words, you don't just submit it to the teacher. Again, there are other people who can view the product. And it's really anchored on a problem, okay? So in other words, what makes the traditional project different from PBL is that the audiences are different, the process is different. It's more open-ended in PBL. The other one is more structured. The environment is different because here in PBL, you have real audience and the problems are real. In the project, it's really just classroom, okay? And then at the core or the center of it is really problem authentic, okay? Authentic problems, okay? Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking now, well, it's very much similar to performance tasks, right? So we who follow the understanding by design, the UBD, we're all familiar with performance tasks. And therefore, just like many of you, before I also asked, para siyang PBL, para siyang performance task na mas complex lang. Okay, so let me answer that question. Okay, yes, there are overlaps, okay, between the performance task and PBL. Okay, now performance task also assumes an audience, assumes a student also assumes a role, right? Di ba sa grasp, my goal, my role, my audience, my situation, a standard, sorry, and then my product. Okay, and then the audiences may also be real. You can also publish it to real people. Okay, situations are simulated. Okay, and then the assessment also asks to measure. Okay, it really serves the purpose of measuring what the students have learned over time. Okay, over the course of the unit. The PBL, as you already know, is also similar in a sense that the audience is real. Okay, there's a situation, it's authentic, the student assumes a role. Okay, so there really are overlaps. Now, what makes them different then? They vary in design, purpose, complexity, and chronology. What do I mean by that? For all of us who do UBD, we know that the assessment is usually given, although we design it at the beginning, right? We give it at the end. Okay. The performance task is also, in a way, okay, the purpose of the performance task is mainly to assess students' knowledge and skill. In terms of complexity, they vary because the PBL, being more real world and being more messy, is more complex. And this is where really the difference lies. Okay. In terms of chronology, okay, in terms of the purpose, the performance task serves as an assessment. The PBL is the main unit already. So the PBL is the teaching, okay, teaching method, and it's also the assessment. Okay. In other words, kung ang performance task given at the end, only after the students have learned the lesson or the concepts, it's the dessert, you serve it at the end. The PBL is already the main course of the meal. So you already begin your unit, you begin it with a problem because the PBL is your entire unit. It is the teaching methodology, it is the curriculum, and it is also the main course. Okay? Let me explain that later on further. Okay? So yun yung difference nila, ha? Performance task serves primarily as an assessment. PBL is not just a product, it's the process, it's the methodology, it is the unit itself. Okay, so the project is the unit. Okay, so the problem which you will ask at the beginning will be the main driver or the anchor of the unit. Okay, and whatever the skills to be learned will revolve around that question. The process is just as important as the product. In performance task, what we grade is really just the product. In PBL, the process, what the students go through, is just as important as the product, because it is in the process where students really develop certain 21st century dispositions and skills, strategizing, adjusting, collaborating. And okay, while PBL is very student centered because they're really the ones doing the tasks, investigating, okay, problem solving, the teacher really works hard prior to that to design the unit. So a lot of the work comes before for the teacher, okay, because she has to carefully design the units, make sure that the problem is aligned to the skills and concepts that he wants the students to develop and demonstrate. Okay? In other words, the teacher becomes the sage on the side. Okay? So, kunyari, parang ano lang siya, di ba? Parang nag-observe siya, ganyan-ganyan, nag-coach, but she really planned everything. She designed it very carefully. Okay? So now, what are the elements of PBL? I want you to pay attention to this extra carefully, because sometimes we really cannot implement PBL to the letter. Okay? In other words, do everything else. But maybe what we can do is get the features of PBL. So for example, so these are the key elements. A PBL, or a project-based learning unit, will always start with a challenging problem or a question. And it has to be provocative and open-ended. Cannot be something where that's answerable with just yes or no. Okay? Or kung yes or no man lang, yung parang it cannot have one correct answer. It has to have a lot of answers, in other words. Second, because it has a lot of answers, there are many possible answers, students' inquiry is sustained. So it's very complex, okay, very complex. It is authentic because it is about real-world problems, something that's relevant to the student or the world, okay? It has student voice and choice, or it allows for student voice and choice because students will be the one working on it, and therefore they have to make certain decisions about how to change the product or the process. Of course, because the product will always have to go through revisions, there are a lot of reflection involved, okay, and self-assessment. There will be critique and revision. That's an important part of it, by the teacher and by the peers and real audience. And it has to be presented to a real audience. So these are the elements of PBL, okay? Maybe present also in your performance task, except that the performance task happens in the end. So what you can actually do is for you to review your performance task and see if your performance task can actually be the unit in itself and make it into a PBL unit. Okay, that's where you can begin. Now, what is the driving question? The driving question is the main question that propels the entire unit. Okay, so as I've said, it has to be provocative, it has to be challenging, and it has to be aligned to the standards, the key knowledge and skills you would like to develop in that unit. I will give you examples in a while. So for project-based learning, you have to have the driving question. You present it to the students. They will inquire. So what they will do is they will try to solve and ask more questions, and solve and ask more questions, and then research on the side. Okay. There will be a product, okay, that they can determine based on the driving question. Okay. And it can vary as well, but it has to answer the driving question. They have to present it to the teacher and, of course, a real audience. And afterwards, they reflect on the experience. Now, some parts of this, like the inquiry, product, presentation, reflection, sometimes what happens is it's not linear. They go cyclical. They keep on inquiring, and then product, and then they will revise, and then et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes it's not linear. Now, remember, if you want to do PBL, or if you want to transform your projects, your current projects or performance tasks, these are the key features you might want to incorporate in your already existing assessments to make it PBL. Okay. First, of course, it has to focus on significant knowledge and skills. I think that's the heart of it. Um, if at the end of the day the student said parang hindi sila natuto, walang skills na demonstrate, then maybe it's not authentic PBL. Okay, development of 21st century must be purposefully embedded in the process. And what do I mean by that? As much as possible, students collaborate. Of course, there will be conflicts, which is supposed to be, it's supposed to be part of the work, the progress. Okay. And then they have to reflect, they have to communicate, they have to create. Okay. And then students have to be engaged. They have to keep looking for resources. They have to keep investigating. They have to keep researching. That's why, in a way, the science investigatory projects are so similar to PBL, okay? Or a form of a PBL, actually. And then maybe what I'd like to say is there really are inputs, milestones, tasks, and assessments. So maybe some of you are asking, paano na yung mga exams namin for that unit? Paano na yung mga long tests? Paano yung mastery tests? How do we assure, how can we assure that they at least know the basics? Part of the milestone of the entire unit is you can give mini quizzes, okay, as part of the milestones, okay, or mini tasks to make sure that, they've already reached this milestone. Ibig sabihin, equip ko na sila with, let's say, the history of the main people of EDSA revolution, and then next step na, okay? So in other words, part of the entire PBL unit are also mini tasks or quizzes which you may give. And the quizzes are ways for you to assure that they have mastered some of the basic knowledge, okay, basic knowledge. And then there's always an entry event. What do I mean by that? You always have to start a PBL with an event that will pick the curiosity of the students. So if it's EDSA Revolution, you want to start your PBL unit, you may show the video of what happened in EDSA. Or you may start with a speaker who was there during EDSA Revolution. Okay? Include a public audience, okay, at the end, so that maybe, as I've said, you can talk to historians, other students as well, outside Xavier or outside your schools. There always has to be revision, reflection, and feedback, and you have to allow students to choose, okay, sometimes their products, or kung hindi yung products, the technology that they will use. Basta there has to be a choice. Now, here are examples. So this time, we're now concretizing what PBL looks like. As I've said, PBL always begins with driving questions. So apart from giving you samples of refined questions, I'm also giving you tips on what questions you can formulate, okay, as the start of your unit. So first is, I'd advise you to stay local. In other words, choose questions that is really very relevant to your community. So for example, what crops can be best grown in the country? If you're, for example, your topic is, let's say, science, biology, flora, something to do with the soil, geology, ganyan. But instead of saying what crops can be best grown in the country, that's too vague, okay, that's too general, make it more local, more relevant to your community. What local crops can be grown effectively and efficiently in the backyard, in their homes, for example, because they're online learning. Or for example, if you're a farming community like where I taught in Pangantukan, Bukidnon, what crops can go in their farm, okay, can grow in the farm. Next is, it's also possible that your driving question will ask students to come up with solutions. Okay, so is the Pasig River safe for any form of recreation? Okay, again, this is a yes or no. So what we want to be able to generate are solutions. So what we want is make it, rephrase it and make it, how can we make the Pasig River safe for recreational activities? So if you have lessons on, let's say, environment, okay, general science, you talk about chemistry, you talk about bacteria, okay, or you talk about tourism, or it's a synergy of sorts, socsci and science, this is a good one. Okay, next is apply questions to the real world. How do we use algorithms to build databases? So for example, this is math, right? And I'm not sure if this is correct, no, but for example, for math, if you make it more real world to them. So instead of just teaching them the formula and solving problems, equations, you can make it a situation and say, Given the following parameters, how do we design a database for Xavier School using simple algorithms? Okay, so they will see the relevance of why they're doing what they're doing, and therefore they will be more engaged and they will be more interested. Another one is make the question current. Okay, for example, di ba, elections, okay, and I'm not gonna try to be political here, no, but for example, what are the qualities of a good leader? Okay, so of course that's a good question, but you might want to make it more specific. Okay, make it more current now. How can our country's president, okay, or mayor or governor or barangay captain, if you want, in your own locality, be the best leader, or how can he best lead our city, our barangay, or our country? So this can be a lesson on citizenship, and can also be for Christian living, education, if you're talking about values, etc. Okay, and then you can also make it about specific to your discipline. Make questions less theoretical and more relevant. Instead of saying how can literature or art be affect the lives of people, you can say how can the poetry or the music of Taylor Swift inspire change among the youth. Okay, so pwedeng ganyan. How can the music of BTS, yeah, BTS, I'm sure many will be engaged. How can the music of BTS inspire change among the youth? Okay, so you can make it less theoretical and make it more relevant to the student's context. Okay, o sa akin, favorite ko, K-drama. How can K-drama inspire change among the youth? Yung ganyan. And then you can also make learners choose and weigh alternatives. So you can say, what are the effects of the lockdown in our city? But what you can do, instead of what are the effects where they will just list down, you want to make it more controversial and say, how can we balance the economic stability and health vis-a-vis the safety of our community during the lockdown? So that is more provocative. Okay, so these are some driving questions that will already propel your unit. Now, for PBL, you can go discipline-based, your own subject lang. Okay, like for example, if you're talking about art or literature, or you can actually synergize with other departments. The great thing with PBL is that because it is authentic, it will naturally lend itself to synergy or interdisciplinary or being interdisciplinary with other subjects. Okay, so for example, a sample PBL project, Am I My Instagram, for grade 7. Okay, the idea is, do teens really get depressed if they don't get enough likes? Students read upon or look at videos and how social media affect teens and self-image. So what students will do here is that they will research. Okay, they will look at the Instagram. Okay, and then they will answer, Am I my Instagram? So possible content here for math is integers, rational numbers, because they do statistics, measure sense of central tendency, and then they can also partner with English for persuasive writing, and say, I am not my Instagram, and then why. Okay, so the product can be a survey, a research report, a proposal, or a persuasive writing composition, and can make it public by presenting it to the school administrator, to the Instagram, maybe someone from Instagram, a representative from Instagram. Okay. Another example is Xavier School Safe Spaces. Okay, so for example, for this product, okay, the project idea is students will propose ways on how to make the school be safe, okay, post-pandemic. So the driving question here will be, how can Xavier School continue to be a safe and healthy space to the learners and educators post-pandemic? I think this will be relevant to all of us who are already planning for hybrid learning, no? And the content here can be a combination of biology and health. You can talk about the nature of the virus, diseases, okay, building immune system. You can talk about math, the measurements of the classroom, what are the spaces for social distancing. You can collaborate with art in designing how the school should look like, and CLE for care for self and others, being mindful of wearing their masks and social distancing. And then major product can be recommendations backed by research, a visual design, okay, can be a diorama, and the students can actually present it to the school administration, okay? They can also include a school doctor and maybe the officials of the locality, okay? There you go. Franco, are there questions so far? Wala naman?
So far, wala pa naman. Sobrang dami pong insights lang sa ating chat. Mamaya po we can read them and we can discuss them during the
Okay.
panel session. No?
Yes. Thank you in advance for really sharing your insights. No, I'm sure I will learn a lot from them as well. So here are some samples of project-based learning in action. So again, this is what we did in Xavier School. First, it's not perfect because, as I've said, no, project-based learning can be quite messy, and therefore it's a continued work. It's a work in progress. Second, of course, we've just really also started PBL 4 years ago. So many of our PBLs are very interdisciplinary in nature and involve a lot of subjects. So it's also extra messy. And third, some of what we will do may not necessarily be applicable to you, but we hope that you can get ideas from what I will share. Okay. So one of the things that we did is a grade 10 PBL, which is how can we bring in nature to Xavier School. This was because this became our unit because first, it's really a unit in grade 10 for environment. So that quarter was really for environment, okay? And therefore, apart from environment, we were thinking, ano ba yung pwede nating significant contribution ng students sa school? What do we need in school, in Xavier? Ano ba yung problem na pwede nating solve? And we realized that our school is filled with buildings, okay? And therefore, we may be lacking in nature, kulang sa green. So what we ask the students, our driving question is, how can we bring in nature to Xavier School? Okay. So our key knowledge and skills here was, and they have to learn environmental concerns such as climate change, air pollution, biodiversity, okay, environmental degradation, and stewardship. And also we want them to do 3D modeling. So from there, you can already deduce that there are three main major subjects that integrated, and these are science, CLE, Christian Living Education, and computer education. Okay, so stewardship, the concept was care of Christian living, the 3D modeling, okay, and also the use of the technology was care of computer education, and of course, the core subject is science. So the challenge was to design a greening project for Xavier, applying lessons in CLE and using 3D modeling skills learned in computer. Okay. And then experts on greening programs, biolific design, okay, gave a talk at the beginning. So there was a talk at the beginning that was the entry event we invited an expert on greening. Okay. And then afterwards, in the process of the unit, of course, there were lessons in between. So parati siyang may lessons. And there were also mini quizzes to check if they have understood the lessons. And that is done synchronously while they're also working on their project. Okay, so simultaneously. So students measured biodiversity levels, made an inventory of the flora and fauna in the campus, okay, and suggested greening environments. So in this task, the students discovered creative and practical solutions that aligned with one of our goals. So as you can see here at the beginning, we divided the sections A, B, C, D, the map of the school, and they're assigned a specific area where they will propose how to bring in more green, how to bring in more nature. And then students using their iPad, I think there's an app also there, they try to come up with an inventory of the school, what the plants are in school, okay? And then afterwards, of course, they presented to the administration. And what did we find out? We found out that some of our trees are not endemic to the Philippines, and therefore they're actually not helpful to the school environment. Third, some of the greens that we have a lot of plants, can actually be brought to the different parts of the campus to promote more air pollution. So those students found out about those as they researched on the different plants that are present in school and the situation of the school. And by the end, okay, they presented to the members of the school administration and the physical plant office. They presented how to make the school more green. So, for example, they suggested putting more plants in the parking area, but it's not just plants. What kind of plants? They had to explain what plants, and then they had to defend that the plant is really beneficial. Also, they came up with budget. Okay, so math also came in because they needed to find out how much it would cost to bring in those plants to save your school. So we actually planned on making this for actually we chose three groups to get to really implement their proposal. Unfortunately, nagkaroon ng pandemic. So baka next year na lang siya. Okay? Another one is I'll just give you two examples, no, so we can have more time for sharing later. What is our vision for the city of Manila? So this one is for grade 12 students who wanted to the main topic is really on SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. And what they wanted to find out is they wanted to study a city, okay, and really analyze the context of the city, but also making use of what they've learned in classes. And the topics we had then were economics, business and management, sustainability, etc., urbanization. And therefore, because of all those key knowledge and skills, we said, parang bagay dyan yung City of Manila. And our question is, what is our vision for the City of Manila? Okay, so students were assigned specific sectors to investigate, such as education, health, environment, public works, business, culture, and history. Okay, and then they presented it to the counselor of Manila, and also the DepEd superintendent of Manila. So as you can see here, those who were assigned in education sector had to measure the classrooms if they're really fit for the students. Those who were assigned in the public order, okay, health and safety and order of the community, talk to the polices of Metro Manila. Okay, you can see them, and then below you will see them actually presenting to these people, okay, to the ones they interviewed, and they made a proposal. Okay, and finally, siguro. This one, kasi we go to Beijing, the students go to Beijing every third quarter, a certain group. They wanted to find out if Beijing is really a great city. And therefore, for them to be able to answer that, they had to really discuss global citizenship, which is really part of our curriculum, sustainability, business, etc., culture. And they did a lot of, instead of it being just a field trip, they visited factories, they collaborated with the Philippine Embassy, and then they made an analysis using a framework by McKinsey on what makes a great city. And then at the end, they checked if the standards, okay, based on the McKinsey framework, if Beijing is really a great city. And their analysis is, yes, it's a great city, but their analysis also showed that it's not a well-rounded city because they are lacking in certain human humanity, but there are certain aspects in authenticity and humanity that you would hope the city to develop some more. Okay, and then what happened after when they came back, whatever it is that they learned about the greatness of the Beijing city, they presented to the Quezon City government so that the Quezon City government can get ideas and insights on how Quezon City can improve. So the councilors also attended, okay? They presented to them. So the audience was really real, okay? So what I want to show here is that this is one of the things that was done in grade 10. And one of the key features of Pgbl is that it has milestones. So if you will ask your students to, let's say, they have to research and they have to gather data, you have to teach them data gathering. And then you have to be able to assess that as part of the unit. Maybe not the main product, but as part of the unit. It can be a formative assessment or it can be one summative assessment. For example, one of your important part of the project is that they have to be able to, let's say, articulate their findings. Then you have to teach them writing. So that can be a milestone. So in other words, the skills, okay, have to be taught. The knowledge has to be taught the entire duration as the students also investigate, and you can give mini quizzes and mini tasks to make sure that they're equipped with the skills. There. So here, the main product is micro documentary that also had to be taught. Okay, that's another project altogether. Okay, so if you will see here, it requires careful planning because you have to identify what the skills are and what the concepts are, and then you have to make sure that they're all aligned with the product and they're all aligned with the question. Okay, so in Yunnan, in another project that we have, what it's a city in China, what must be kept and what must be changed. For the students to be able to answer that, they have to have knowledge and skills in ecology, diversity, globalization, culture, environment. And we had to teach them necessary skills on gathering data, on researching, on discernment and culture. And they had to go through all these steps. Okay, data gathering, answering the question, reflecting on the community, and of course, creating the product and presenting them. Now, maybe some things that we need to keep in mind as we do PBL. Okay, again, we need to start slow and simple. So baby steps lang. What I would suggest is that you do it on a smaller scale, which means your subject muna. Madami yan for sure sa CLE. Madami yan for English. So start slow and simple, baby steps. And what you can actually do is look at your current or existing projects and existing performance tasks and see if it can be made into an entire unit of PBL. Okay? Because also not all assessments can be made into PBL, and you shouldn't. And second, not all the units can be made into PBL. May iba talaga na very technical na okay lang naman na worksheet, okay lang naman din na exams. But the ones which are rich, which are very relevant to the world, then that's what you make into a PBL. Okay? Pero for example, ngayon mga I don't know sa calculus, trigonometry, baka okay rin lang yan na regular. Okay, regular exams, that's okay. Regular unit, that's okay also. Next is the teacher is a sage on the side, meaning the teacher will really spend time designing it. Okay, she will scaffold the process. Okay, you can't just get into PBL and say this is a project problem, bahala na kayo. Okay, and then I suggest that of course with anything that's new, or if you really want to move forward or do something transformative, you have to experiment and take risks. So if you start to do PBL, it's okay to make a lot of mistakes. That's what happened to us. And we're still making a lot of mistakes, but we're learning from them. Okay. Second is there's a learning curve. So at the beginning, it's going to be very, very frustrating. Pero kapit lang, diba? Kapit lang. With anything that's new, with anything that's about to be great, you will really have hardships, and that will make you better educators. Okay, you get better as you do it. Don't worry. Fourth, as I've said, small scale, be specific to the subject. Okay, if you want. Okay, but again, those with authentic problems, units or topics with authentic problems will naturally have connections with other disciplines. Okay, fifth, planning is key. Okay, so actually you really don't need to make to spend on any technology for PBL. Okay, but what you need to invest in will be time and energy. So what you need for you to be able to move PBL forward is really your openness, okay, your time. Okay, so those two things. And then involve the teachers. If they're administrators here, no, you cannot just really shove it down their throats. You really have to work with them, okay? Because PBL will not be effective if there's no ownership or the buy-in of the teacher. So at the beginning, of course, there's a lot of resistance because it requires a lot of work. But eventually, when they see that there really are benefits and you really develop 21st century skills, slowly the teachers will latch onto it. But you have to work with them. They have to be the ones to implement it. And therefore, you have to give them all the support that they need. And start with topics or units that are easy to connect to the real world. So marami yan, especially social science. Lalo na science, di ba? Sobrang dami sa science, physics, chemistry, biology, nutrition, the different digestive systems, diseases. Okay, English, there are also a lot. Okay, so I'm sure being the great educators that you are, you will be able to think of many, many ideas. Okay? So, how does PBL nurture 21st century skills? Again, because you allow students to take charge, you develop independence and leadership. Okay? Because you give them voice and choice, you allow them collaboration, accountability, and engagement. Because students have goals and need to accomplish their tasks, they develop responsibility. Because you allow them to strategize because they really solve problems, then creativity and problem solving is part of it. Okay. And then because they have initiative, they develop initiative and ownership, you develop leadership, conviction, and stewardship. So, really, when you talk about PBL, you're not just talking about key knowledge or skills of writing, skills of solving math problems, or let's say balancing equations in chemistry. Okay, but rather in PBL you also develop key dispositions that will really prepare them for their career, for college, and really for life. Okay. So to end, okay, what I'd like to say is again, you do not need expensive resources, but it will really require time and careful planning, and it can be quite frustrating. Pero kaya yan, promise. PBL is really more than the product, okay? It is also the process. So just as important as the product is also the process. And then PBL creates advocates out of our students. So for example, those who went through the PBL in grade 10 in Xavier School about nature, at the end of the unit, they became more or less more aware of making the environment greener, less pollution, and therefore they, in a way, became advocates of the environment. Okay, so you create advocates out of your students, students who really care about the world, care about authentic problems of the world. Okay, and then PBL does not only develop students who are 21st century learners. In fact, when we teachers design PBL, it also makes us really 21st century educators, not just really putting priority on the content, but also putting priority on the skills, and not just any skills, also 21st century skills. Time and again, we've said that, we really want our students to be prepared for the real world. And yet, when we look at our classrooms, it's filled with worksheets or filled with projects that have no relevance to them. Okay. Again, the challenge is not to eradicate those because those are important. Okay. We still have standardized tests, but to vary our assessments and expose them to more real world problems and real world assessments. Okay. So again, PBL is not just an assessment, it is a teaching methodology that are together. Okay. They're dovetailed together. And PBL, if done consistently, is really a transformative learning experience, not only for the students, but also, and more importantly, I think for the teachers. So like Franco said a while ago that, of course, at the beginning, it can be very challenging, but it can also turn your world upside down. It can be difficult at the beginning, but you will see your classrooms differently once you've tried this. Again, of course, I know that we have limitations with depth ed requirements, but I think in small scales, you will be able to do this. And of course, if you need any help, I'm sure Kaagapay is here to give you support. And of course, I'd like to say that this is only just a patikim because there's still a lot of things to talk about PBL, but we'd gladly help you if you need anything. Thank you.
Ayan, yun yata Miss Tess ang pinaka masarap na na appetizer na natikman namin ngayong araw na to. Maraming salamat. Yes, no. Siksik-liglig, no. Teachers, mapakita niyo naman. I'm kaya sobrang perfect talaga no si Miss Tess to talk about PBL because theoretically alam po ni Miss Tess yung yung definitely the PBL. Okay? Plus what I really like Teacher Pao is that talagang may application. Okay? Nakita nyo kanina, it's a balance of theory perspective of PBL at same time yung practical application of PBL in our school, because we really do apply PBL and use PBL in our school. By the way, Miss Tess, gusto ko lang i-shout out yung message from our chat. This is from Sir Robbie de la Cruz. Okay. Yes, so what I really like about PBL is the metacognitive element, reflection. Students determine by themselves what else they need to know and be equipped with this with how to solve the problem. Totoo, no? Miss Tess, no, yung metacognitive, yung what am I learning and how am I learning? I think that's a very, very important aspect of PBL.
Right. And I think that as you go through the process, you always have to think about, am I doing things right? So there's always that. Kasi nga, I think compared to other, the difference between PBL and maybe the other assessments that we have is that it's really, really messy. It is simulating the real world. Diba? Parang now the pandemic, the problems that we're facing, you don't have just one solution. And sometimes it takes time for you to solve the problem. So that's what PBL also simulates, the messiness, the grayness, the pagkavuka of the world. Thank you, Robbie. Robbie was the one who did the nature, bringing in nature to Savior School, bringing in
Yes. And I think the Beijing project is also Sir Robbie was also there involved in
Yes,
the
right.
yes, is Beijing a great
He should
city?
be the one. I think he should be the one giving this talk. Kidding.
Yes, but of course, Sir Robin. By the way, Sir Robin is one of our administrators in Xavier School, who also led several TBL projects in our school. Okay? One of the many idols in Xavier School. Teacher Pao, any reaction, insight so far? Mukhang na speechless ka ngayon dyan.
Syempre, na-jaw drop na naman ako as always by Miss Tess Nebres Ladrido na sobrang amazed ako how I think ako, no, it's the process, how you go about this. Now, yes, we know yung magiging effect nito sa students, but I'm thinking about the whole process from the admin to the teachers to the students, no, how you will lay it down. Because without the support of the administration, that paano mo sila palalabasin doon? Paano mo sila ipapamit sa mga iba-ibang tao, 'di ba? Parang kung si teacher kasi syempre ang concern niya yung nasa loob na ng classroom, pero sinong tutulong sa kanya para magawa pa yung kailangan niyang lumabas ng classroom and to get all the resources that that's needed to support the project that is being aimed at. Because from what I've heard, no, from Miss Tess, talagang yung project na gagawin mo, hindi siya you're not just putting yourself in the shoes of that person, talagang gagawin mo siya. 'Diba? Hindi siya that's how she compared it with the performance task, 'diba? So talagang buong package siya. As in from inception to lahat ng kailangan gawin. I think nga may nakita pa ako doon, parang boardroom yung picture ni Miss Tess. And I'm supposing that was a discussion, no? So it's not just a teacher thought, parang sige, paano ko to gagawin? Pero kung ako lang to, hindi rin siya lalabas eh. Alam mo yan, parang the community support is actually there. So this is something that we can really think about, no, as teachers. Yun. So thank you so much.
Pero ano lang, no?
Sharing.
Yan, go Miss Tess, no, reactions first.
No, actually, for example, I think the one of the good things about this is pag alam ng students na ipapresent talaga nila ito sa mga real people. Like for example, we told them they will present it to our school president. They will present it to the DepEd Superintendent of Manila. The engagement of the students nandun talaga, and of course they take it seriously and they realize that may relevance yung pinag-aaralan nila, and second, there's a possibility na sundin or i-implement. So that is one side of PBL that is not that cannot be done by other assessments, right? Because nga syempre sometimes you're just really focused on the paper, or you're just focused on, let's say, one diorama, okay, or one paper. But this one, your work goes beyond the four walls of the classroom, and therefore you feel like you're empowered as a student. But I would also like to say that siguro para lang hindi matakot yung iba, the examples I showed you are really big PBLs. In other words, they're synergized. But like the example I showed you, it can just be one specific subject. So for example, a paper on Soksai saying what makes a great, how can the barangay captain become a better leader. You can just interview, okay, you can interview, or you can interview maybe the barangay captain or the constituents. It can be as simple as that, and it can just be one subject. Or pwede rin naman siyang paper talaga if it's philosophical. Except that, of course, the ones I showed you are really huge. But don't be intimidated. Kaya-kaya ng IB, Pao. I think IB can do that. More so, the
Kasi,
students.
opo, Miss Tess, maraming salamat for that. I think siguro din, our teachers should also realize na yung talagang PBL, yung sabi nga ni Miss Tess kayo, no, messy talaga siya. But very organic. Yung, kasi Miss Tess, na siguro yun din yung medyo nakakabapag sa PBL. Yung, kasi as teachers, we're very organized. We're very, like, we have like what to do or what to do next. We're that kind of professionals. Kaya lang sa PBL talaga, there could come a point, for example, that a solution is not working. We'll have to change that, okay? Or there's something else that my students need to know or to understand before they can proceed. I'll have to teach that. So those kinds of things, no, are actually developing organically during the PBL, and that makes it exciting. Hindi siya like nakaplano na yung buong taon mo about what to do and what to learn. Okay? Yun yung isa sa mga perfect aspect ng PBL. Okay?
And I guess you're right because it's very organic. And I think Pao mentioned it also na because it's organic, it really requires a letting go from the teachers. So in other words, alam mo naman tayong teachers, di ba, we're really attached to sometimes our content, our curriculum. It means if we want to do project-based learning, we have to be willing to revise our the focus of our curriculum. One, second, we have to be open to revising the chronology. Okay. In other words, if this will be better for the third quarter or third term because we can pair with another department, then we have to be open to that. And third, really, it will require openness from the side of the teacher and the administrators. Kasi, ano siya, masalimuot. In other words, it's complicated. Yan.
Miss Tess, may question? Yes, totoo.
Complicated.
This is from Teacher Arvin Pagsibigan. Can this be compared to our BSIT client-based capstone project? I think that this is the capstone in general, Ms. Tess, no? Capstone projects in different schools, such as student researches.
Yes, I think it can. No, I think it can, for as long as what you can do is just really to make sure that the other elements are there. So, for example, the authenticity of the student researches. Are they researching about a problem? Okay. A topic that's really relevant to them or to the society. First, second, are they really going to publish it? In other words, who will they present it to? So, and then do they have choices in terms of how the process will be or what the product is. So may flexibility. If those are present, then it can be PBL. So alam mo yon, Franco, I think that's a good question because meron na may seeds, marami nang nagpi-PBL pero hindi lang siya, maybe they don't know about it in that way, or maybe because there's just some features that are missing. Okay? Pero yun, parang feeling ko important na kailangan real world yung problems at real world yung audience, and the students have to be assuming a role na talagang either innovator sila, change maker sila, yun, for them to feel that it's also real. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Tess, for that one. This one is from Teacher Florenda Felicio. How can we use PBL when students cannot collaborate because of the online classes and face-to-face is not yet allowed?
Okay, thank you very much. I think Soksai is doing in our school. Soksai is doing PBL, but PBL doesn't always have to be doesn't have to be group work all the time. Okay, thank you for asking this question because it's what I want to emphasize. Because PBL can also be an individual effort. So, for example, if we talk about planning for a nutrition for the family, okay, let's say I think the science team did this, that they want to, let's say, keep their family members healthy during the pandemic, and therefore they have to make a meal plan. Okay, so what kind of diet should my mother, father, and brother have so that they will be have a strong immune system? And that question, okay, is an individual. It's an individually done. It's based on your family. That's your context. Second, what you will do there is you will interview your mother, your father, if they have certain comorbidities. For example, may hypertension, meron ba silang asthma, meron ba silang, let's say, they have diabetes. And then you will create a meal plan that will be fit for their own profiles. So the lesson here, I think this is science. I'm not sure if it is nutrition or chemistry or biology. I think it's a combination of all. But that is an individual project which can be done by a student. Will need no extra resources, just the family members. Can be done online. Okay? So maraming possibilities. I think the crucial thing is for you to remember that it has to be a real world problem. Okay? And then what happened here is that the students presented to a nutritionist after and also presented it to their family members. Kasi sabihin la, Dad, ito dapat yung diet mo. Mommy, ito dapat yung diet mo. And then they have a reflection after. Okay? So those are key features. So it can be done even online, and it can be done even without partnering with someone. Okay? Of course, you can do that as well. Diba? Pwede rin naman yun. Better if it's collaboration. But we also understand the limitation of online learning. There.
Pero, yan. Maraming salamat, Miss Tess, no? And of course, kay teachers, wag natin din na marami na rin tayong mga collaborative tools ngayon, no? Kahit naka-online classes tayo, documents can be collaborated on via Google Docs or other tools na syempre, pasok natin yung Google Tools, no? Asa rin na naman ako ng Teacher Rose Malin sa chat later on. Okay, pero actually, Miss Tess, no, so totoo lang, mas madami pang resources nag-open. For example, sabi nga ni Teacher Den, shout out din to Teacher Den from Xavier School also, Miss Tess, Teacher Den Ramos, okay? Yes, it is doable even if we are having online classes. Say, for example, we can invite speakers in online classes, no? Perfect way for an entry event, Miss Tess, no? For invite a speaker and they can easily be accommodated kasi wala nang problema sa logistics kasi usually pag nag-invite ng speaker, ang hirap ng logistics ngayon. Link na lang ang kailangan mo ipadala sa ating speaker. Na kagad, no? Start na kagad ng entry event natin. Thank you, Teacher Den, for that one. Okay.
Franco, shout out to Teacher Den because it's actually her project. I think her team who did the nutrition Pgbl, the diet plan.
Yeah.
I think it's her team. And then, for example, you mentioned entry event. So, as I've said, all Pgbl starts with an entry event. So, wala nito yung performance task kasi performance task happens in the end, no? And regular projects. So, you want to introduce your unit, okay, your project-based learning with an entry event. So, kumbaga pang pick siya ng interest. It can be as simple as, of course, as I've said, showing a video, or it was mentioned to me, it was shared to me na it's about, I think Assumption did this, I'm not sure, no, fake news. The topic was fake news, and then they started with no classes tomorrow. So yun yung entry event nila, something like that, na no classes tomorrow. But syempre, the students started thinking, So ganun siya. It can be as simple as that, or it can be as grand as, for example, inviting, in our case, the Metro Manila councilor, or we're hoping because we're gonna have one soon, the mayor. Yung mga ganyan. It can be huge, it can be small, but it has to be able to pick the interest of the students.
Ang cool nun, Miss Tess, nung no classes fake news.
I think that's what they did, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. So, syempre talaga
Ang galing nun. Syempre talaga magkakagulo yung mga tapos mag-isip sila. Ang maganda doon, nag-research ba sila to confirm or naniwala nila. Miss Tess, alam ko din, meron din tayong sort of like that kind of entry event sa Xavier School when we did experiment on students if they're going to clean up or are they cleaning up after eating in the pantry, something like that. Okay, we did it for like mga couple of days yata yun, na video lang, tingnan lang yung mga students and what can be done to solve that problem, something like that. Ganda ng mga ganong entry event. Smart on, Miss Tess. Maraming salamat. So teachers, meron pa po ba tayong mga questions, concerns? So far po, mga insights pa rin, Miss Tess, yung sinishare sa chat natin at napakaganda ng mga ideas. And totoo nga po si Miss Tess, no, nasabi nga niya kanina na teachers, marami sa mga aspect ng PBL ginagawa niyo na po. Okay, at kailangan na lang i-align, mas kompletuhin yung mga elements and principles of PBL. Yan. Okay. So teachers, last call for questions if there are any. Or Teacher Pao, do you have questions? Kasi Miss Tess mukhang mag-i-implement ng PBL si Teacher Pao na sa
Simulan
ika.
natin.
Dadalhin
Try
na po niya.
natin. Diyos ko po.
Yes.
Anyway, no, I just would like to, yeah, thank you for sharing that, no, Miss Tess, that this is actually, doable, no, for sharing that it's bite size, no, kaya siyang gawin sa loob ng classroom, and a lot of comments, a lot of insights our teachers have mentioned is that all you have to do is to accept first that this is indeed one way to actually do it. Openness, no, the openness that you'll have to adapt, no, lalo na kung very very structured kang teacher. Ay nako, tapos hindi mo kasi Miss Tess, talagang ang problema dyan, paano matatapos yung content kung hindi ko alam kung saan pupulutin na maaaral nila yung content, diba? So it's really planning, no? It goes back to planning. Hindi ka pwedeng pumasok ng classroom na PBL tapos wala kang plano. So, hindi siya po pwede. Yan. So, thank you so much. Ayan, may tinatanong si Sir Ram Hal. Can we have copies of your samples, ma'am, para mapag-alalan pa lalo and hopefully ma-establish na po namin sa school? Napakalinaw ng difference ng performance task at PBL.
Sure. I'll give it to
Explanation, no?
I'll give it to
Yes,
Franco.
Well,
Oo. Si Franco, expert na rin yan sa PBL, so pwede kayo magpaturo sa kanya. Pero I like what, so yes, you can get, and thank you for saying that the difference is clear, because that's one of the things that I had to grapple with myself when we were beginning with PBL. Parang, kasi isipin mo, parang pareho naman sila ng performance task, pero yun na nga, magkaiba sila. And then, siguro pa, one of the things that we really need to ask ourselves is that, and we need to let go of is parang paano yung content, 'di ba? Paano yung content? So isipin niyo na lang na think about it that unang-una, to be able to do PBL, you don't have to do PBL all throughout the year. You can just choose specific units, and the units have to be the ones which are really relevant to the students. The ones which naturally lend themselves to authenticity. Second, think of PBL as one snapshot of an assessment, because while the students can perhaps solve equations, or for example, they can write, you don't know if they can really transfer it in real world context. So imagine nyo na lang, gusto nyo ba na alam nga nila lahat in their heads, but they will not be able to demonstrate or transfer it in real world setting. And that's what education is all about, for the students to be able to apply what they've learned inside the classroom outside and in their real lives. Yeah.
So, maraming salamat sa paglilinaw po, no, Miss Tess. Okay? So teachers, let's show, no, our appreciation for Miss Tess, no, for spending her time with us, no. Bakasyon po namin ngayon, pero ang amin pong principal, no, ay nandito po sa community natin to share her time and expertise, and we're very very thankful. So let's send our thanks, our appreciation to our great speaker for today. And of course, just like every time, no, we also like to show our appreciation to our speaker for today, kay Miss Tess, through a certificate of appreciation. Teacher Pao, would you mind to read our citation for Ms. Tess?
I am honored not to present the certificate of appreciation to Ms. Maria Teresa N. Ladrido for sharing her knowledge and expertise in the recently concluded webinar entitled Project-Based Learning, Redefining Instruction and Assessments in the 21st Century, awarded today, November 4, 2021, to be signed by the Kaagapay Administrator, Sir Jambi, myself, Sir Jello, and Sir Franco. Thank you so much, Ms. Tess. No, this has been very, very fruitful and helpful. Makikita nyo naman po sa chat box, sobrang ganda daw po talaga ng presentation nyo for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the
At sobrang
opportunity.
sobrang linaw, no? Miss Tess, bago po kayo magpaalam at bago po kami magpaalam din, I would like to ask a short message, okay, for our teachers, okay, as we continue to move forward, okay, into the pandemic, no? Right now po, naka parang tayo na midway na po ng taon, no? Yung ibang teachers po, kaka-start pa lang.
Right. So, of course, to our fellow educators from the different parts of the Philippines, we're all experiencing the same thing. We're in the pandemic, and I'm sure that you're very, very frustrated and you're very challenged. But nevertheless, you're teaching from your screens and you're caring for your students as best as you can. So, siguro what I want to say is that when times get very frustrating and when times get challenging, just remember that the job or the thing or whatever it is that you're doing, okay, is a very important and meaningful one. What I always tell the teachers is that you're not just teachers. You also are the sources of joy of your students during this very trying times. You are their anchor. You also serve as their counselors and their second parents. So please hang in there, okay? You are doing an excellent job. You are inspiring in more ways than you can ever imagine. And don't worry, there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's almost there. And I'd like to thank all of you for really considering teaching not only as a job, but as a vocation and the mission, and you're doing great things for everyone. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Miss Tess, no? Siyempre, proud ako, no, bilang principal namin si Miss Tess, no? Maraming salamat, Miss Tess, and thank you for your time, no, and for your expertise and sharing it to our community. Okay, and we also wish you, no, the best, okay, as you continue to lead a school, no, not only a group of teachers but an entire school for this school year.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Miss Tess.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ayan.
Diba?
Okay. Siyempre, ramdam mo naman yung pagka-proud ko na yung
I
ngiti.
know.
Sobra kasi alam mo, siyempre, no, si Miss Tess has been with us na for a long time as before she was the head ng senior high namin, okay? And then naging principal namin, and he did, no, and she's actually doing a really, really good job, no, especially during the pandemic, no, and how she actually led us, okay, Savior School, no, during the pandemic. Kaya sobrang thankful, no, kami kay Miss Tess for all the things she's been doing, okay. At alam mo, pinaka-gusto ko talaga kay Miss Tess talaga is that yung niya, yung the way she immerses herself, no, into these things, okay.
Yes.
Kasi diba pag sometimes, okay, may tendency tayo pag sobrang busy ng isang leader, okay, hindi talaga niya pinapasok yung mga ganitong, for example, Pgbl, how to do it, okay, pero talaga siya yung principal na alam niya yung pasikot-sikot ng Pgbl, how to go about it. Talagang that's why she can actually guide our teachers, no, in conducting a full length Pgbl. Okay.
Sir Franco.
And baka mababa yung speech ko. Oo.
Oo, Sir Franco, meron nagsasabi dito, feeling relieved ka na daw. Na-stress ka ba? But I know, you're very proud of Miss Tess Ladrido. At ito pa, Sir Franco, grabe yung pasabog mo. Sabi nga, opening pa lang, iba na. Tapos,
yes, opening pa lang yan. Oo. So, teachers, wag kayong bibitaw sa November series namin because we've made sure that our November series will be packed with so many great things, no, to prepare us for or to actually to remind us, no, about 21st century education, as well as to prepare us as we go back, no, to a face-to-face setup or a post-pandemic setup. Okay, and Teacher Pao, no, we'd like to invite our teachers, okay, on Saturday, pakimark na po ang ating calendars, okay, on Learning by Refraction, a practitioner's guide to 21st century, no, Ignatian pedagogy. Okay, Teacher Pao, clarification, no, hindi lang po ito, baka isipin natin, is this specific to Jesuit schools? No, okay? Kasi this is a book, no, that was actually written by Father Johnny Go, okay, and Miss Rita Atienza. They collaborated in a book. What they did was to actually curate researches, strategies, and all the 21st century approaches, no? Okay? And put it in a book. So you can just imagine that our session on Saturday will be a discussion of researches, data-driven, napaka-importante yung Teacher Pao na sa panahon ngayon, kaya na pinag-uusapan ng facts, kay data, data-driven, ang ating ang discussion natin on Saturday. So you will find out what it exactly means when we talk about what is 21st century education. So yung mga pinag-uusapan natin about being a 21st century educator, being a 21st century a 21st century education, ito yun. Dito natin makikita yon on Saturday. And Teacher Pao, syempre, yung level ng kaba ko na naman, kasi former president po namin, no? Former president po ng school namin, si Father Johnny Go, no? And of course, Miss Rita Atienza is a nationwide known consultant sa iba't ibang mga schools, okay? And yun. Okay, so teachers,
na tayo dyan. Credentials lang, grabe na, di ba? But I'm sure the hearts of these people to be able to share their thoughts, their expertise, their researches, no? Actually, their researches to us. That's really something that, we can really treasure. Yan. So, sobrang ganda ng November series na to. Kakaiba.
Yes, oo. Tsaka, by the way, no, si Father Janigo, no, tsaka si Miss Rita ay nag-head din ng education program ng Ateneo. Okay, so talaga pinag-uusapan natin ang curriculum development, okay? Being 21st century educator. They're definitely two of the experts in the field right now. Okay, so we're very excited. Okay, yan. Currently, the founding dean of Gokong Way Brothers School of Education and Learning Design, Father Janigo.
Diba?
Hindi ko alam na excited Teacher Pao. Teacher Pao, kayo na bahala, no? Nasa background ako sa Saturday. Kayo na dyan.
Doble yung
teachers, no? So, wag po kayo mawala, teachers, no? That's a session you should never miss. You should not miss, no? Alam ko pong Saturday yun, okay? But do please, no? Attend, no? And be with us on Saturday, okay? That's a very, very special session as well, okay? Lahat naman ng sessions natin for November na special session. Anyway, so teachers, maraming salamat for staying. Okay, so we'll now be showing you your evaluation link. Please make sure to fill out it properly with your name, your email as well, so that we can send you your certificates for this session. Okay? Don't forget, okay, para po hindi tayo mag-email, no? At mag-message, minsan, no? Malilito. 5 to 7 days po ang pag-send ng ating certificates. Okay? Kasi po, in between those days, nakikipag-date po kay Mrs. Adun, so bawal po kami ma-istorbo.
Yeah,
just kidding.
Napaka-importante.
Siyempre, may mga iba pa pong work, no, in between. That's why we can't, deliver it in na mabilisan. Pero, as soon as possible po, napapadala po kagad namin ang inyong certificates. Okay? So, teachers, ito na po ang inyong evaluation link. Please check if it works, okay? And that you can actually do the evaluation. Ayan, abangan na naman ni Sir Arvin ang certificate na kaya kang ipaglaban. Matapang kasi ang certificate namin. Okay?
Yes,
kaya kang ipaglaban. Okay?
Oo.
Rin, sabi ko, Teacher Pao, ang certificate natin, certificate na contented.
Ayun
Ikaw lang. Yes. At isa pa, yung certificate na malaya. Malaya kang mahalin. Yes.
Yun, no?
Walang ibang siyempre yung natin yung mga namamangka sa dalawang ilog na yun, di ba?
Correct.
Ayan, kinilig si Teacher Carrie. Teacher Carrie, magandang pabahod sa gabing ito.
Yan.
Yan, maraming salamat ulit, teachers. Have a nice evening. Ingat po kayong lahat and we'll see you again on Saturday po. Okay, we'll do that, Sir Mel Hassan in Danan. Yan, nasend na po. Okay, maraming salamat, teachers. Paalam po.